I still remember the first time I met Jake. It was at a friend's party, one of those college get-togethers where no one really knows anyone except for the few mutual acquaintances you have. I was standing by the snack table, trying to hide my awkwardness behind a cup of punch, when he walked over and introduced himself. His smile was warm, and his eyes, there was something about them that made me feel like I could tell him anything. He was funny, kind, and had that charm that made you believe everything he said. I was 22 years old at the time, fresh out of university, still figuring out who I was and what I wanted in life. Jake seemed like the answer to all those questions. From the moment we started talking, it felt like a connection. We bonded over everything, our love for old movies, our shared obsession with that one pizza place, even the music we listened to. He became my best friend, my partner, and the one person I could always count on. It wasn't long before we were inseparable. We spent weekends exploring the city, having long talks into the night, and enjoying each other's company like we had known each other for years. There was a sense of ease between us, a rhythm that felt natural. Everything clicked. As the years went by, we built a life together. We moved in together after just a few months, something that seemed like a natural progression. We decorated our apartment with mismatched furniture that somehow worked, and I remember how proud we were when we put up our first Christmas tree, even though it looked a little lopsided. Those small, imperfect moments made our lives feel like they were exactly how they were supposed to be. By the time we reached our third year together, we had already talked about the future, marriage, kids, the whole thing. Jake was always the kind of guy who made promises and kept them. He told me he wanted to build something lasting, something real, and I believed him. We had plans. A small wedding, an old house we could turn into something beautiful together, and kids one day. I imagined us growing old together, sitting on a porch somewhere, watching the world go by. It seemed perfect. We were perfect. Our wedding was everything I had ever dreamed of. Surrounded by family and friends, I stood there in my dress, watching Jake as he promised to love me forever. There was no doubt in my mind that I had made the right choice. I was marrying the man I knew I would grow old with, the man I had trusted with every part of me. After the wedding, life settled into a rhythm that was both comfortable and familiar. We spent our days working, planning our future, and continuing to build the life we'd always talked about. It was the kind of life people envied, at least, that's how it seemed on the outside. I had everything I had ever wanted, love, stability, and a man who made me feel secure. But I guess what I didn't see was how much Jake had changed. We didn't fight much, which I thought was a good thing. We were easygoing, or so I believed. We never raised our voices at each other, never had those explosive arguments I often saw friends go through. I convinced myself that things were perfect because they seemed to be. But sometimes, perfection hides the cracks beneath the surface. Jake started working more, spending long hours at the office. I didn't think much of it at first. He was ambitious, and I supported that. I even encouraged him to focus on his career, thinking that we were both just doing what we needed to do to secure our future. But as time went on, those late nights at the office turned into entire weekends spent away. At first, I didn't mind. I was busy with my own projects, and it gave me time to focus on myself. But then, the absence started to feel different. It wasn't just about the time, it was about the distance. Jake wasn't just physically absent, he was emotionally unavailable too. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that work was just taking its toll on him. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was a distance between us that I couldn't explain, a quiet tension that lingered in the air even when we were in the same room. I would reach out for him, for some sign that everything was still the way it had been, but he was always just out of reach. We were no longer the couple who would stay up late talking about our dreams. Those conversations had faded into silence. I tried to be understanding, tried to give him space, but I couldn't deny that something had changed. I found myself questioning our relationship, wondering if this was just the normal ebb and flow of marriage or if something deeper was happening. But no matter how many times I asked him, he always reassured me. Everything's fine, he would say, and I believed him. I had to. I wanted to believe that the love we had was enough to weather whatever was going on. Little did I know, the cracks I had ignored for so long were about to break wide open. And when they did, I would be faced with the reality that the man I thought I knew was someone entirely different. It was a Saturday night, just like any other. Jake had left for a work trip earlier in the day, and I was at home, trying to unwind after a long week. I had no particular plans, just the usual routine of catching up on TV shows and maybe reading a book. The silence of the apartment was both comforting and suffocating. I missed him, but I was used to his absence now. It wasn't uncommon for him to be gone for a few days at a time, and I had learned to keep myself busy, to avoid feeling the weight of the space he left behind. Around 9 p.m., I received a text from Jake. It was a simple, casual message, asking how I was doing and telling me he missed me. I replied with something lighthearted, telling him I was fine but wishing he was home. It was our usual exchange, nothing out of the ordinary. I was just finishing dinner when my phone buzzed again. But this time, it wasn't Jake who texted me. It was a message from an unknown number. At first, I thought it might be some kind of spam, but curiosity got the best of me. I opened it, and my heart sank as soon as I saw the words. The message was from a woman, and it read, "I don't know how to explain this, but I've been seeing Jake for the last 2 months. I didn't know he was married. I'm sorry." I froze. My breath caught in my chest, and my hands trembled as I read the message over and over, trying to process the words that were right in front of me. My first reaction wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was disbelief. I thought maybe this was some kind of mistake, some cruel joke. But the more I looked at it, the more real it became. The woman went on to explain that she had been with Jake during one of his business trips, and that she had no idea he was married. She said she wanted to end things, but that she was deeply sorry for what had happened. I didn't know what to do. I stared at my phone, trying to make sense of it all. Part of me wanted to scream, to call Jake right away and demand answers, but something stopped me. Instead, I sat there in silence, trying to hold myself together, trying to understand how this had happened, how the man I had trusted so completely could betray me in such a devastating way. After a few minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Jake, my hands shaking as I dialed his number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before he picked up. His voice sounded tired, distant. "Hey, babe," he said. "What's up?" I could barely speak. I was choking on my own words, but I managed to ask him, "Jake, what's going on? Who is she?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him trying to figure out what to say, what lie to tell me. But there was no avoiding it. The truth had already come out. Jake started, his voice faltering. "I didn't want you to find out like this. It was a mistake, Sarah. It was just a silly mistake. A silly mistake." Those words stung more than anything else he could have said. I couldn't believe it. How could he call something so serious, so hurtful, a mistake? I wanted to scream at him, to demand how long it had been going on, how many times this had happened, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I just asked, "How could you do this to me, Jake?" He tried to explain himself, to apologize, but his words felt empty. The damage had already been done. His apologies didn't change the fact that he had lied to me, that he had been with someone else behind my back. He told me he was sorry, that it had meant nothing, but I knew better. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal. And no amount of apologies would ever be enough to erase that. "I never meant to hurt you," Jake said, his voice pleading now. "I know this is bad, but I love you, Sarah. You have to believe me." But I couldn't believe him. I couldn't even look at him the same way anymore. I couldn't erase the image of that message from my mind, of the woman who had been with him while I was at home, trusting him, loving him. The trust we had built was shattered in an instant, and there was no going back. I didn't know what to say after that. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest, but all I could manage was a quiet, "I'll talk to you later." And with that, I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence of our apartment, feeling a mix of anger, confusion, and profound sadness. Jake had made a silly mistake. But for me, that mistake would change everything. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The thoughts were too loud in my head, the hurt too raw. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty space beside me, trying to convince myself that everything I had just learned was some kind of nightmare. But the truth was undeniable. Jake had betrayed me. He had broken something inside me that I wasn't sure could ever be fixed. The next morning, I was still in shock. I had barely slept, and I couldn't focus on anything. The apartment felt too quiet, too still. It was as though the life we had built together had evaporated overnight, leaving behind a hollow shell. I couldn't understand how I had missed the signs. How could I not have known that something was wrong? Was I so blind to what was happening right in front of me? I knew I needed to talk to Jake, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. I needed time to process, to understand how I was supposed to move forward. How could I face him after what he had done? That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Jake. It was simple: "I need to talk to you. Please, can we meet?" I didn't respond right away. The last thing I wanted was to sit face to face with him and listen to more excuses, more apologies that felt like they meant nothing. But as the hours went by, the weight of it all pressed on me. I couldn't ignore him forever. So, I agreed to meet. We decided to meet at a cafe down the street from our apartment, the place we used to go to when we first started dating. It felt like a strange decision, one that seemed to hold too many memories for me to bear, but I needed answers. I needed closure. I needed to hear him say it, to hear him take responsibility for what he had done. When I arrived, Jake was already there, sitting at a table in the back, looking like a man who had lost everything. His shoulders were slumped, his face pale, as though the weight of what he had done was finally starting to sink in. When he saw me, he stood up quickly, but I didn't move. I stayed where I was, my heart pounding in my chest, unsure of what I was even supposed to feel. He approached me slowly, his eyes filled with regret, but I didn't want to see his remorse. I didn't want to hear his apology. I wanted answers. I wanted to know why he had done this to me, why he had chosen someone else over the life we had built together. "Sarah," Jake started, his voice shaky. "I know what I did was wrong. I've been thinking about it non-stop, and I don't even know how to make things right." I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, waiting for him to continue. The words that had been building up in my chest were finally ready to come out, but I held back, trying to stay calm, to stay composed. The last thing I wanted was to cry in front of him. "I don't know how it happened," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was a mistake. I made a stupid decision, and I regret it more than you can imagine." "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice cold. "You call cheating a mistake?" He winced at my words, as though the truth of what I was saying hit him harder than anything else. "I know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't have any excuses. I was selfish. I don't expect you to forgive me. But please know, it didn't mean anything. I still love you, Sarah. I always have." I shook my head. "You don't get it, Jake. It's not about love anymore. It's about trust. You've destroyed that." I could see the pain in his eyes, but I didn't feel sympathy. I was too hurt, too angry. He had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and no amount of apology could take that away. "I know I can't undo what I've done," Jake continued, his voice breaking. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. I'll prove it to you. I'll do anything. I laughed, but it was hollow. How? How can you prove anything to me now? I trusted you with everything I had. And you threw it away for what? A fling? An affair? What could possibly make this okay? Jake opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, as if waiting for me to tell him what to say, what to do. But I didn't have the answers. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't even know if I wanted to try. I don't think I can do this anymore, I said, my voice trembling despite myself. I don't think I can ever trust you again. And I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way. Jake's face crumpled, and I saw the desperation in his eyes. He reached out for my hand, but I pulled it back. The distance between us felt vast, like an ocean that could never be crossed. He was no longer the man I had married, the man I had trusted with everything. I'm sorry, Jake said again, his voice barely audible. I never wanted to hurt you. I stared at him, feeling nothing but emptiness. His apology no longer mattered. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and took one last look at him before walking out of the cafe. The door swung shut behind me with a finality I had never felt before. As I stepped into the cold air, I realized that I was walking away from the life I had known. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain, I couldn't go back. Not now. Not ever. In the days that followed our conversation at the cafe, everything in my life seemed to unravel. I had imagined that confronting Jake would give me some sense of closure, but instead, I felt more lost than ever. I had walked out on him, but it was as though the weight of his betrayal had followed me home, lingering in every corner of our apartment. I couldn't escape the echoes of his apologies, the hollow promises that meant nothing. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about him. The silence between us grew unbearable. We didn't speak for a week. Each day that passed felt like a lifetime. I would wake up in the morning, stare at the empty side of the bed, and wonder if I had done the right thing. Had I been too harsh? Had I given up too easily? I questioned my decision constantly, but deep down, I knew I couldn't go back. I had already given him so many chances, so many moments to prove that he was worthy of my trust, and he had failed each time. This time, there was no going back. On the 7th day, my phone rang. It was Jake. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't answer. I didn't want to hear his voice, to hear more apologies that would only make the pain worse. But he didn't give up. He called again. Then again. And again. Until finally, after the 10th call, I broke. I picked up the phone, my hand shaking as I pressed it to my ear. Jake, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you want? There was a long pause before he spoke. I can't do this anymore, Sarah. I can't live with what I've done to you. I need to see you. I need you to understand how sorry I am. I didn't say anything at first. What was there to say? He had hurt me in a way I couldn't even explain, and no amount of words would ever fix that. But as the silence stretched on, I realized something. I realized that it wasn't just his mistake that was hurting me. It was mine, too. I had said, cheating is a silly mistake. Those words, so casually thrown out in a moment of defensiveness, had destroyed everything. I had dismissed his betrayal as if it were nothing, as if it were just a trivial mistake that didn't matter. But in doing so, I had given him the permission to walk away from our marriage without facing the consequences of his actions. I had allowed him to believe that it was all just a silly mistake that could be swept under the rug. And now, here we were. He had walked away, and I had let him. My words had been the catalyst for it all. I never meant to make you feel like it didn't matter, Jake continued, his voice thick with emotion. I know I messed up, but I can't just walk away from you, Sarah. I love you. I've always loved you. The words hit me like a wave, but they didn't bring the comfort I had hoped for. Instead, they only reminded me of the mistake I had made, of how I had allowed him to slip away so easily. How I had unknowingly given him the excuse he needed to leave. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I tried to find the right words. Jake, I don't know what to say. I don't know what I was thinking when I said that. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean that cheating was just a silly mistake. But it feels like it is now. Like we can't go back. I don't want to lose you, Sarah, Jake said, his voice desperate. I know I don't deserve another chance, but please, just give me one. I'll do whatever it takes. I swear I will never hurt you again. I felt my chest tighten, the words I had wanted to say so badly now hanging in the air between us. I wanted to tell him that I forgave him, that we could work through this. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if I could. Could I ever trust him again? Could I ever forget what he had done? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision in my gut. Jake, I can't give you that right now. I need space. I need time to think about what I want. He didn't respond right away. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, and I knew he was trying to find the right words. But there were no words left. The damage had been done, and there was no simple way to fix it. I understand, Jake finally said, his voice small. I'll give you all the time you need. But just know that I'm here. I'll always be here, waiting for you. I hung up the phone without saying another word. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, my heart heavy with the realization that I had allowed my own words to dictate the fate of my marriage. I had pushed him away, and now I didn't know how to bring him back. I didn't know if I wanted to. The days that followed were difficult. The weight of everything, Jake's betrayal, my own words, the end of the life we had shared, pressed down on me relentlessly. I spent my days in a fog, unsure of what to do next. Our apartment, once filled with laughter and memories, now felt like a foreign place. I couldn't walk into the kitchen without seeing the empty chair where Jake used to sit, couldn't glance at the photos on the walls without feeling the sting of loss. Everything reminded me of him, and every corner of my life seemed to be drenched in the memories of a love that no longer existed. But amidst the pain, something shifted inside me. There were moments when I would find myself laughing at a memory, not because I was happy, but because I had to remind myself that there had been good times, too. There had been love. It wasn't all bad. And even though I had been hurt beyond measure, I had also learned something valuable about myself. I wasn't just a victim of betrayal, I was a woman who could stand up, who could walk away, who could choose her own future, even if it meant leaving behind everything I had once known. As I spent more time alone, I began to focus on myself, something I hadn't done in a long time. I started to take better care of my health, joining a gym and committing to a fitness routine. For the first time in months, I felt strong, physically, mentally, and emotionally. The act of taking control of my body, of pushing myself to be better, gave me a sense of empowerment that I hadn't realized I was missing. Each drop of sweat, each small victory, was a reminder that I was capable of more than I had ever given myself credit for. It was on a Sunday afternoon, nearly a month after Jake's betrayal, that I decided to make a change. I had spent the morning organizing the apartment, clearing out the clutter that had accumulated over the years. As I looked around at the space, I realized that I was no longer living in the past. I was starting to carve out a future that was mine and mine alone. The old, familiar pain was still there, but it no longer had the power to define me. I called up a few friends I hadn't seen in a while and made plans to meet for coffee. We spent the afternoon talking about everything and nothing, catching up on each other's lives and sharing laughs that I hadn't realized I missed. It was simple, but in that moment, it felt like a new chapter was opening. I wasn't alone. I had people who cared about me, people who reminded me that there was still joy in the world, even if it didn't look the way I thought it would. Later that evening, as I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jake. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I hope you're finding peace. I stared at the message for a long time. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let it fade away into the past where it belonged. But then, I realized something. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first received that phone call from him. I had spent weeks questioning my worth, wondering if I was enough, if I had somehow caused his betrayal. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I was stronger now, and I didn't need his validation to prove my worth. I didn't respond to his message. Instead, I put my phone down and took a deep breath. It was a small act, but it was a powerful one. I was letting go. I was moving on. The following week, I packed a bag and took a short trip to the coast. The ocean had always been a place of solace for me, a place where I could clear my mind and reconnect with myself. As I stood on the beach, feeling the cool breeze on my skin and listening to the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, I realized that I was finally free. Free from the pain, free from the guilt, and free from the toxic relationship that had once defined my life. When I returned home, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in months. I had done the hard work. I had faced the truth, confronted the pain, and made the decision to move forward. And though I still carried the scars of the past, I no longer let them define me. I had learned that life was too short to hold on to things that no longer served me. I was ready for something new. In the months that followed, I continued to focus on myself. I pursued new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and even started dating again. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but I had learned that I was worthy of love, not the kind of love that was given conditionally, but the kind that was built on trust, respect, and mutual care. And though I hadn't found it yet, I knew that when the time was right, it would come. Jake's presence in my life slowly faded into the background. He would occasionally reach out, but each time, I found myself less and less affected by his words. I had long ago accepted that we weren't meant to be together, and as painful as it had been to let go, I knew it was the right decision. One day, as I was walking through the park, I bumped into him. It had been months since we had last spoken, and seeing him in person was surreal. He looked different, tired, older, as if time had weighed heavily on him. He smiled weakly, but I didn't feel the rush of emotions that once came when I saw him. Instead, I felt a quiet sense of closure. "Hey," Jake said, his voice soft. "How are you?" I smiled, not because I was trying to be kind, but because I genuinely felt good about where I was. "I'm doing well, Jake. I'm doing really well." We talked for a few minutes, but it was clear that we were both moving in different directions. When we said goodbye, I didn't look back. I knew that I was on the right path, and I had no intention of letting anything, especially him, hold me back. As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. I was finally free. Subscribe to our channel for powerful real stories that touch your heart. Join a community where emotions run deep and every story brings a new perspective. Don't miss out, hit that bell for weekly updates.